Masechet Gittin, Daf Lamed Zayin. We continue our discussion of Piros Bol and Shemitat Kesafim in general. And so now we ask, Mai Piros Bol? What does the word Piros Bol mean? Amar Rav Chisda, Piros Bule u Bute. It's an ordinance about Bule and Bute. Well, what do those words mean? Bule elu ashirim. The word bule is referring to wealthy people. Dichtiv v'shavarti et geon ozechem v'tane Rav Yosef elu bulaot shebihuda. Pasuk says, I will break the pride of your power, right? Your haughty ones. And Rav Yosef said that's talking about the bulaot, meaning those people who are rich. And haughty because they are rich. So bule refers to rich people. Bute refers to poor people. Bute elu haniyim dichtiv ha'avet ta'avitenu, pasuk saying, you shall surely lend him, and you see the bet and tet there, and so to lend him, you're lending the poor person. This refers to poor people. Obviously, this is not a scientific derivation. It's more of a folk etymology, and the point of it is that this is an ordinance, enactment on behalf of both the rich and the poor. The poor, obviously, so they can receive loans because people were refraining from giving loans since the Shemitah was coming and they would be canceled, and the poor weren't getting money. It's also an enactment on behalf of the rich people who are giving the loans so that they will be able to collect them back, and that way it benefits both sides. Okay, so that's folk etymology, but now you see that the rabbis in Bavel, who didn't have a lot of access to Greek, unlike in Eretz Yisrael, where Greek was more common, not that everybody was an expert in Greek. If you had a good education, then you would know Greek, otherwise not. Kind of like today, most Israelis know some English, some know English very well, some know just a few words. So something similar would have been back then, probably a little less knowledge of Greek in general among the Jewish population in Israel, but there were some who did in Israel. In Bavel, it would be much less, because Bavel was under the Persian Empire, not the Roman Empire, and so they knew relatively little Greek in Bavel. Nevertheless, even the rabbis in Bavel recognized that this is a Greek word, and so Amar le Rava le La'oza, Rava, who lived in a major city of Mehoza, a suburb of the capital of the Persian Empire. So there were lots of people there, people from different places, and there was someone there a foreigner, meaning someone who spoke Greek. And so Rava wanted to know, what is the etymology of the word Piros Bol? So he asked him, "My Piros Bol?" And this foreign Greek-speaking person said, "Amar le Pursa de Milta." It's an enactment regarding the matter. Milta meaning milah, it could be a word, or a legal matter. So it's an enactment regarding a legal matter. Most likely the derivation is, as we mentioned yesterday, bule means a council or a court, and piros means before, meaning you're coming before the court and giving over, presenting the loan documents to the court, right? And if it was done literally, if one actually gave the loan documents to the court, and then the court was collecting them, that certainly would be fine. Then the Piros Bol enactment of Hillel may be referring to the fact that you don't actually have to give the physical loan documents to the court, but you could just say, I hereby submit my loan documents to the court, and it's as if they are collecting them for you. And so that's the legal loophole that is the institution of the Piros Bol. Okay, so this derivation before the court, it seems, even though it wasn't cited up here, it actually seems to be hidden within the next story. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shemuel, Yetomim en srichin Piros Bol, v'chen tane Rami bar Chama, Yetomim en srichin Piros Bol. The Rabban Gamliel ubet dino avihen shel bashamayim. So Shemuel said that orphans do not need to write a Piros Bol. If someone owes money to orphans, then the orphans can collect that loan even after the Shemitah, even without a Piros Bol. Shemuel said it, and it happens to also be a Braita, and the Braita explains that Rabban Gamliel and his Betin, it really means any Betin, but at the time of Rabban Gamliel, he was the great sage, and any Betin afterwards, they are the fathers of the orphans, right? The Betin looks after the well-being of orphans, because they're minors, and who else is going to take care of them? because their father isn't there, and so the Bet Din will always step in and make sure that their interest, their financial interest is taken care of. Because of that, it's they don't have to write a Piros Bol or submit a Piros Bol, because the Bet Din always is looking out for their interest, and therefore the Bet Din, if they need to, will step in and collect a loan on their behalf. So they're already collecting the loans on behalf of the orphans. From here, you see that this is this sugya coming right after the derivation sugya here seems to be hinting that the rabbis knew that the origin of the meaning of Piros Bol is something that is before the court. Okay, Tananatam. In the previous stop, we mentioned a Mishnah in Shevi'it that expands on what the meaning of Piros Bol is from the 10th Perek. And so now we're going to cite a few more Mishnayot from that very same 10th Perek of Masechet Shevi'it that expand on the laws of Shemitah. Tenan hatam en kotvin piros bol ela al hakarka she'im en lo mezakeu betoch sadehu kol shehu. One cannot write a piros bol unless the borrower has some amount of land. We explained this yesterday. The reason is because the mechanism of piros bol is that even you owe me money, and so if you have land, then your land is mortgaged over to me. So basically, it's kind of like I already collected the loan. And so therefore that's why the Piros Bol can only work by me submitting this to the Bet Din, which is kind of like registering a mortgage. And once I register the mortgage, it makes it official. It's as if that land has already been collected by me, and that's why Shemitah will not cancel the loan. But if you don't have any land, then this mechanism won't work. And so, if you don't have land, here's what I could do. I can transfer to you a little bit of my land, which is kind of interesting, because I actually want to collect the money from you, and I'm giving you land so that I can collect land from you. Yeah, that's exactly how it's working, but I'm not giving you a whole big field. I could just give you kol shehu, even a tiny amount of land, that wouldn't be worth that much. I can give over to you, and then now you have that land, and now I can collect from that land. Even if that land is worth less than the amount of the loan, one could still, as we saw in an earlier story, collect it again and again from that same land. Okay, v'kama kol shehu. Now, how much is this? A very small amount. How small is small? Amar Rav Chiya bar Asher ba'amar Rav, afilu kelach shel keruv. Even enough land to grow a stalk of cabbage. That's it, one stalk of cabbage, right? A little tiny patch of land. Amar Rav Yehuda, afilu she'ilom makom letanur v'lachirayim kotvin alav piros bol. Rav Yehuda says, even if I give over to you, or lend to you a place on the land, enough that you can fit an oven or a stove. We're not talking about a giant wolf oven or bakery oven. We're talking about the kind of little ovens made out of clay, or stove that they had back then. So just a small area, like a 1 foot square area to fit, that is sufficient. And if you own that, or if I give you a piece of land like that, then I can write a Piros Bol and collect the loan. Now we have a question, a challenge. Ini vatane Hillel en kotvin Piros Bol ela al asis nakub bilbad nakub in sheno nakub la. There's a Tosefta here that Hillel says one cannot write a Piros Bol unless on a potted plant unless it has a hole in it. So he's talking about potted plants. Is that considered land or not? It says if there's a hole on the bottom of the plant, that's considered connected to the ground, and so that's fine. If not connected to the ground, then not. Right? So we infer from his words that only if it has a hole in it. If it doesn't have a hole in it, then not. And our question is based on the idea that, well, this pot has to be somewhere, and isn't it going to be sitting on the ground? And therefore, if it's sitting on the ground, then you own, right, that ground that's under the potted plant. So then, how come I can't write a Piros Bol on the ground that the potted plant is sitting on, even if it doesn't have a hole? So that's the challenge. And so we say, Amai v'ha'ika mekomo. right? This is the challenge. You said that even a small amount of land is considered sufficient. All right, that was the statement of Rav here and Rav Yehuda. A small amount of land is sufficient, but based on our inference from this Tosefta of Hillel, it sounds like a small amount of land, just enough to the size of a pot, would not be sufficient. So it actually has to be attached to the ground. If not, the space of the land is not sufficient. So how do we resolve this? La sericha demanach asiche. No, over here, Hillel's cases we're talking about that it's we put the pot not on the ground itself, but rather it's on a stand. And so it's not actually even touching the ground or taking up space on the ground. And so that's why if it has a hole in it, then it's possible that something is connected to the ground under. So then that's considered land. The pot itself is considered land if the pot has a hole under it. But if it doesn't have a hole in it and it's also standing on top of stakes and on a stand, and so it's not even taking up space on the ground. So then that's not considered anything. It's like having just a pot on your windowsill. So that's not considered owning any land at all. Okay. Rav Hashem makne le gidma dedikla v'chatab aleh Peros bol. Rav Asher, he lent money to someone, and that person didn't have any lands, and so he would transfer over to that person even the stump of a palm tree. So that's fine. It's just a small piece of land, but that's enough to write a Peros bol. Rabbanan de Rav Asher masre milayhu lehadadeh. And so these are other easy ways to write a Peros bol. The sages in the school, the students of Rav Asher, they would transfer milayhu, this is the same as what we saw before, meaning words, but here means legal matters, their debts to each other. They would transfer their debts to each other, since they were all sages, so they were all considered like a betin. And so I say, I transfer my debts to you, you transfer your debts to me, and that was sufficient to, instead of actually having to sit and write out a whole Peros bol, they just needed to do that. Rabbi Yonatan masar mileh l'Rabbi Chia bar Abba. Amale serichna midi acharina, amale la serichat Rabbi Yonatan. He transferred over his debts to Rabbi Chia bar Abba. So you will hereby collect the debts for me. So he acted as his betin, and so he did that. And Rabbi Yonatan said, "Okay, is that all I have to do?" And he said, "Yeah, that's it. That's all you have to do." Okay. Tinu Rabbanan en lo karka ve'le'areb yesh lo karka kotvin alav peros bol. Now, if I lend money to you and you don't have any land, but you have a guarantor on this loan, and the guarantor has land, then that's good enough. I can write a Peros bol, because even though you don't have land, I can submit this to Betin and take out a mortgage on the guarantor's land. And so, therefore, the same mechanism, it's as if I already collected it. Lo ve'la'areb en lahen karka ve'lechayav lo yesh lo karka kotvin ala Peros bol me de Rabbi Natan. Again, if I lent you money, you owe me money, and you don't have land, but there happens to be somebody else, a third party, that owes you money, and that person has land, then that's also sufficient, right? Because even though you don't have land, there's a law of Rabbi Natan that I can go directly to that third party and tell him, listen, you owe that person money, that person owes me money, so give it to me directly, and therefore I can take out a mortgage directly on that third party's land, and so I can write a Peros bol. Tentanya Rabbi Natan omer minayin lenoshe b'chavero maneh v'chavero b'chavero minayin shemosin mizeh v'notnim lazeh tamud lomar v'natan la asher asham lo. Rabbi Natan taught that how do you know that if A owes money to B and B owes money to C, then C can go all the way back to A and say, pay me, because the pasuk says, give it to that who is guilty, meaning that who is responsible, and so that means you give it to whoever is owed the money. Whoever owes the money can give it to whoever is owed the money, even if it's one step removed. And so since you can do that, as long as someone has land somewhere along the line, I can write a Peros bol upon you, because the person that owes you money has land. Tenan hatam. Okay, so now we're going to learn another Mishnah in the same perek, the first Mishnah. from Masechet Shevi'it. HaShevi'it Perek 10. HaShevi'it meshametet et hamilveh ben bishtar ben shelo bishtar. So the question here is, what types of loans are cancelled by Shevi'it? All types or only some? And so the Mishnah says Shevi'it cancels loans whether there has a written contract or even if it doesn't have a written contract. So now there's going to be two opinions. From one opinion is the rabbis in Bavel, and the next opinion is the rabbis in Eretz Yisrael. So the first generation sages in Bavel, Rabu Shmuel Damre Tarvaihu, Bishtar sheyesh bo achrayut nechasim, shelo bishtar she'en bo achrayut nechasim, kol sheken milveh al peh. They say will cancel all loans completely. And so the two categories in the Mishnah refer to with a shtad is that it has there is land that's mortgaged for the loan. Without a shtad means that land is not mortgaged, and all the more so if it's an oral agreement. See, if it's an oral agreement, then that does not make a mortgage. But they're including shelo bishtad, meaning to mean that whether it's written or not, and it could be written, but it doesn't have it doesn't say that all and your land will also be mortgaged over to it. So the only way that you can mortgage land on a loan is if you write a contract and you write in the contract that your land is going to be mortgaged to pay the loan. So the point here is that whether you wrote that in the contract or didn't write that in the contract, the loan will be cancelled. That's the two categories mentioned in the Mishnah, and we can derive from Kal Vachomer that certainly if you didn't even write a document, then that kind of loan would be cancelled. So Rav and Shmuel say all loans. Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Damre Tarvaihu, the two early sages from Eretz Yisrael, so they agree and say bishtar shtar she'en bo achrayut nechasim shelo bishtar malveh al peh aval shtar sheyesh bo achrayut nechasim eno meshamet. They think that the two categories in the Mishnah, the first one with a document, that's referring to with a document, with a loan, with an IOU, but an IOU that does not mention that your land is mortgaged over to it. And shelo bishtar is talking about an oral loan, which certainly does not create a mortgage. But that's the only two categories that are canceled by Shemitah. If there is a loan document and there's a guarantee of land mentioned in it, and I have a mortgage, then since I have a mortgage on your land, then Shemitah does not even cancel that loan in the first place. So this is a huge leniency. It would mean that in that kind of loan, you wouldn't even need a piros bol. A piros bol would be effective for the other type of loan where I did not create a mortgage initially. So then I can transfer it to Beit Din, and so I would need their help to be the collectors, because I wouldn't be able to collect it myself. But if I have a mortgage already on your land, so then it's already like it's paid. Okay, so Tanya Kevated Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, a Braita that supports this more lenient opinion, more lenient at least for the lender, because he can collect after the Shemitah. Shtar chov meshamet v'im en bo acharut nechasim eno meshamet. Says here that the Shemitah cancels a loan document, but if the loan document has mortgaged land in it, then it does not cancel. That's exactly what Rabbi Yochanan Shakish said. Tanya idach, and yet another braita, siyem lo sadeh achat behalvato eno mishamet. V'lo ela afilu katav kol nechasai achrayim v'arabin lach eno mishamet. This braita supports also their opinion, because it says if one specified a certain field, right? So this is, you owe me $1,000, and this certain field A, is going to be mortgaged for this loan, then that loan will not be canceled, because making it specific is like I already have access. I already have ownership over that land, so it's already paid. And the Braita continues and says, not only if I specify, even if it says in the loan document, the borrower says, all my property is pledged as a guarantee to this loan, even then, the loan is not canceled, even though I don't actually own all of your land, because I'm only going to have to take part of it, and I didn't specify which part I'm going to take, or which part that you're going to use to give me to pay back the loan. And so you might think in this case that I don't already own it, because it's not yet decided which piece you're going to want to use to pay back the loan. But this Baraita says, even so, it's like the loan is already paid back, because I have a mortgage on some piece of your land to pay for it, and therefore it's not cancelled. Okay, now a story. Now the a relative of Rabbi Aseh, he had a certain promissory note, and it mentioned a guarantee of land in it. So the relative came to Rabbi Aseh, and he asked, now this went through Shavuot, and so now he wants to collect. Can he collect on it or not? He didn't write a Pidos Bol. Amarle meshamet or eno meshamet, does Shemitah cancel it? Amarle eno meshamet. Rabbi Aseh, who is from Eretz Yisrael, makes sense. He's following Rabbi Yochanan and the Shakish, and so he says, it has a mortgage. Okay, then the loan is not cancelled. Shabke, Shibake, ve'ata lekamed Rabbi Yochanan. And now this relative, of Rabbi Aseh, he went and asked for a second opinion. I don't know why he asked for a second opinion. He already got a good answer, but maybe he just wanted to double check. And so he asked the greatest sage of the generation, Rabbi Yochanan, Ma'ale Meshamet, and he says, your loan is cancelled. This is strange. So apparently he went back to Rabbi Aseh and said, you told me this, but your own teacher, Rabbi Yochanan, says that the loan is cancelled. So Rabbi Aseh went to clarify, because he went to the shiur and he knows what we just read over here from Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Aseh, like Rabbi Yochanan, Amar Meshamet on the Meshamet. So Rabbi Aseh asked Rabbi Yochanan, well, what's the law? Is such a loan that has a mortgage cancelled or not cancelled? Amar Meshamet, it is cancelled. So now he's very surprised. Rabbi Aseh says, I don't understand. I heard you in the class, right? In the other day, you said that a loan that has a mortgage is not cancelled. Rabbi Yochanan replies, what, just because we said a theoretical statement, we're actually going to act on it? I didn't mean this as halacha l'ma'aseh. We're just talking about it in the class, and it says, seems to me this would be something that would be similar to that case, and so it would make sense that it should be cancelled. But I didn't declare this publicly as something that you can actually follow. Hold on, but I thought Rabbi Aseh said you brought a Baraita, and there was a Baraita that supported you. So doesn't that mean that, yes, you're right, that is in fact the halacha? Why can't we follow it? Lema'aseh, Amarle dilmahi Bet Shammai, and Rabbi Yochanan explains, well, that Baraita could be the opinion of Bet Shammai. Bet Shammai says that something, a deed, a contract that is stands to be collected is considered as though it has already been collected. That's why, according to Bet Shammai, since this is a deed that could be collected, because I can come in and take your land, therefore it's as if it's already collected, and that's why Shemitah is not going to cancel it. However, halacha, that's only Bet Shammai. Halacha is not like Bet Shammai, right? Like Bet Hillel, who would say that a shtar that is can be collected, and it's not collected until it's collected, right? Anybody who has a loan outstanding, even a check that you didn't deposit yet, you never know. It's not quite collected until you actually get the money in your hands. And so therefore, since you don't have the money, it's not like it's collected, therefore the Shemitah will cancel the loan. And so this is an important lesson, that even though a lot of times we read statements of Amoraim in the Talmud, sometimes they say it as a halacha l'maseh, certainly when they announce it in a pirka, in public, or doresh, but when they're just saying something in the Bet Midrash, they may be giving a theoretical opinion only. Okay, now we're going to continue with more Mishnah, another Mishnah from the same Perek in Masechet Shavuot. Tenanatam hamalveh et chavero ma'ot al hamashkon, v'moseh shetarotav lebetin and meshametin. Someone who lends money to his friend and he gets collateral back, all right, some item. I give you $1,000, you give me a watch, and I'm holding your watch, or a piece of clothing of yours. Or if someone transfers the collection notes to the court, in both those cases, Shemitah will not cancel them. Okay, so Bishlamo Maseh Shrav Bedin, the Tafse Lehu Bedina, Ela Malve al Mashkon Maitama. We understand the second one, if I give it to the court, so the court is then collecting it on my behalf. That's the basic. That's the basic mechanism of a pidos bol. But this idea of the collateral, right? How does that work? What would be the reason that the Shemitah would not cancel a loan just because I have collateral from it? Amar Rava mishum de tafas le. So Rava says, because I have it. I have the item. Since I have your watch or your pajamas, therefore it's like it's already collected. And that's so it's already collected. So Shemitah, you just want you want your watch back. So then just give me the money back. Give me the money back, and then I'll give you your item. But it's already collected. So now, that was Rava's opinion. Abaye challenges Rava and says, wait, according to your logic, let's say you owe me $1,000, but it also happens to be that I'm staying in your house, in your field. I'm sleeping there. And so, would you say that since I'm sleeping there, so I can seize it, right? It's mine, and therefore that would that type of loan also not be canceled? We're not talking about where I have a mortgage on the loan. We're talking about where I have just an oral loan. Without a deed, but we're friends, and I happen to be staying over for some time. So would you say, since I have the watch in my hand, so now it's mine, so it's like I already collected it? Would you say the same thing regarding your field? Since I'm sleeping there, so now it's like it's mine? Because I'm sleeping on your property, and then that also would not be cancelled. So Rava replied, Amar le lashane mashkon dekani le. Mid Rabbi Yitzchak, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak says, no, an item, a movable item, is different because I acquire it, I have it in my own possession. Whereas if I just sleep over in your property, it doesn't mean I possess it. And how do we know that a mashkon is in fact given over to the lender? That as long as he's holding on to it, he basically owns it. And kind of like if you give something to a pawn shop, they basically own it, even though you have a right to come in and pay and get it back. But if you don't, then until you do so, they own it. So we prove this from Rabbi Yitzchak's statement. How do you know that a lender owns the collateral? Because it says, this is regarding if someone gives you their clothing to hold as a mashkon, and let's say it's their pajamas or their blanket that they need at night, it says that you should give it back to him at night, because otherwise what's he going to sleep in? And if you do that, it will be considered a righteous act, a tzedakah. Now, if it's not mine, then how is it considered tzedakah? It's yours the whole time. So it must be that it is mine. I took it from you as a collateral, so it's mine. And now I'm going to do an act of great righteousness and let you use it at night, and I'll take it back in the morning when you don't need it anymore. And so we can prove from here that, in fact, if I hold on to your collateral, then it's like I own it. Therefore, it's like I already collected the loan, and therefore the loan is not canceled through the Shvi'it. And yet another Mishnah from the same Perek, Tenanata, Mamachazir chov l'chavero b'Shvi'it, tzarich she'amar lo mishamet ani. Ve'im amar lo af al pichen, yikabel himenu shne'amar, ve'zeh devar ha'Shemitah. Let's say I lent you money, and then Shemitah came through and canceled it already. And then you decide you want to pay it back anyway, right? You feel like paying it back. So you come to me and you say, here's your money, here's your $100. I have to say, Meshamet ani, I am not accepting I abrogate the debt, right? Meshamet, I let it go. I am not collecting it, all right? And by doing that, that's actually how I fulfill the mitzvah of tashmet yadecha, when I literally refuse to even take that which you offer. Now, if after that you say, even so, take the money, then I'm allowed to take the money, right? I have to refuse first because Shemitah, and if you say, okay, I'm going to give it anyway as a gift, then that's fine. I can take it from you as a gift. Now, how do we know that this is how you perform Shemitah? Because it says Zeh Devar Shemitah. It doesn't say Zeh Shemitah. So Devar means with words. And by saying those words, Mishamet Ani, then I fulfill the mitzvah. In fact, the Ben Ish Chai says that, and so I actually did this last year when there was a Shemitah. I wrote a Pidos Bowl, and after the Pidos Bowl, I lent $5 to someone, and then after the Shemitah, they saw me and they offered to pay back, and I said, Mishamet Ani, right? I abrogate the loan, and that way, the Ben Ish Chai says one should do this on purpose so that you can actually fulfill their mitzvah. Okay, that person actually didn't say Af al Pichen, and they kept the money. But that's okay. Amar Rabba, v'tali le ad amri hachi. Now, Rabba says, the lender can lift up his eyes in waiting until he says, Af al Pichen. In other words, the Yerushalmi is more explicit about this, right? If you come and offer me back my $10, I can say Mishamet Ani, but it could give a look, right, and maybe even make a hand gesture, like, yeah, okay, now you could pay it over to me. So, right, so we're going to both have an understanding that you're going to pay it back, even though officially I have to refuse it. But then I can expect you and even hint to you that you should give it back to me anyway, as a gift. That is Rabba's stance. Very interesting. Iti be Abaye, kishu noten lo al yomar lo behobi ani noten lecha, ela yomar lo sheli hen ubamatana ani noten lecha. So we have a challenge from Abaye. This is from a Braita that says when he gives the money, he should not say giving it to you as a debt, but rather, if the borrower wants to pay back, he shouldn't say, I'm giving it to you as a debt, to pay off my debt, but rather he should say, this money is mine, because Shemitah canceled the debt, but I want to give you a gift. Now, from this Baraita, it sounds like it's the borrower who has to come at his own initiative. If he wants to pay back, he should just make sure to pay back and say this is a present, not this is a repayment of the loan. So it sounds like the initiative all comes from the borrower, and that the lender cannot hint and make faces and hand gestures to say I want you to pay it back. So this is a challenge to Rabba, and Rabba answers Amar le talele name ad amar hachi. No, that's what it means, that he should lift up his eyes and depend on him until he says, okay, I will give it to you as a gift. And so that's consistent with Rabba's statement. Okay, I explained this statement that talile, according to most Rishonim, that she actually says here that talile means that I can even force you, coerce you to pay the loan, even through Shavi'it, by doing this, by first you offering it. Then I say no, tashmet. But after that, I could say, okay, now you better give me a gift. Right, and you can even be a lot more explicit, even forceful. But it seems like the Yerushalmi says that it's not being so forceful, rather just making faces and gestures to say, okay, pay up now and give me a gift. Abba bar Marta. We have a story that Abba bar Yomi hava masik be Rabba zuze. There was a guy named Abba bar Marta. He was also known as Abba bar Yomi. And Abba was trying to collect a debt from this guy, and Shemitah already passed and canceled this debt. And so that person came to Rabba and gave him the money after the Shivit. And Rabba properly says, I abrogate the debt. No, I'm not taking the money. Sheklinu ve'azal. And this person, Abba, then took the money and left, because, right, Abba said he's not gonna accept the money. So Abba kept it. Ata Abaye shkeched hava'aseh. Now Abaye sees Rabba as his teacher, and he sees that Rabba is upset and sad. Why are you upset? This is what happened, right? I lent this guy $1,000. He came after the Shemitah to pay it back. I said, Shemitah, right? I abrogate. And then he went and took the money. And he should have offered to give it to me as a gift. So I'm really upset. And again, this is Rabbah who said that you're allowed to expect the person and even gesture to the person to give it to you as a gift. So Abaye heard that. Azal legabe amar le ametat le zuze lemor. So Abaye says, did you offer to pay back Rabbah? Amar le in, I did. Amar le umay marlecha. What did he say? Amar le mishametani. He says, I abrogate the debt. Amar le ve'amart le afal pichen. So Abaye asked Abba, did you say, even so, take it as a gift? No, I didn't tell him that. So the Abbas says, listen, I'm telling you, if you would offer it to him as a gift, he would take it from you. Therefore, go back to him and offer it as a gift and says, even though the debt is cancelled, I still want you to have the money. And so Abba was a good guy. He just didn't know that this is the unspoken expectation. So Azal amtinhu nihalev amar le afa pichen. So Abba did go back to Rabba and says, you know what? I want to give you the money back anyway. Shekli numine, and Rabba took it from him. He needed the money. Amar Allah hava be da'ata behaisu rabbanan meikara. And Abba reflected, probably not in front of him. He says, this sage was not knowledgeable from the beginning. He didn't know, right? That he's supposed to offer once, and then I say, I abrogate the loan, and then he's supposed to offer it again as a gift. He didn't know this. That's why he didn't do it. But what's so interesting about the story is that even though Abaye is the one that challenged Abba from this Braita in the first place, so it seems like Abaye did not agree and did not think that you should expect the person to give it as a gift. Afterwards, nevertheless, Abaye did go ahead and help out Rabba by giving this advice to Abba, you should go and pay it back anyway. Which is again very interesting, even though they have this disagreement in the Bet Midrash, and Abaye maybe he was satisfied with the answer, and so he was fine with it, or maybe he says, well, according to Rabba, he's the teacher, and he says it's allowed, and so even though Abaye personally might disagree, he still went ahead and gave assistance to Rabba to implement this workaround to be able to be paid back. So this is kind of an alternative workaround, so that it could be that Abba did not want to use the Piros Bowl. We saw before that there were many sages that were against the idea of a Piros Bowl, so this would be kind of an alternative solution to just make it a formality to say, oh, Shemitah, but then you go ahead and collect it anyway. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav Nachman Ne'eman Adam lomar piros bol haya biyadi ve'avad mimeni ma'itama kivan tatikin rabbanan piros bol lasheve ketera ve'achel isura. If someone comes and says, listen, I had a piros bol, but I lost it. I wrote a document, right? I'm going to transfer my loans to the court, and it was signed and everything, but I lost the piros bol. But can I still collect my loan? And so Rav Nachman says, yes, we believe a person who says, if they say, I had a piros bol, but I lost it. If they don't have Piros Bol at all, then they can't collect. Now, why do we believe a person? Well, since the rabbis made this takana of Piros Bol, and it's so easy to do, so there's no reason to think that a person would ignore the permitted way of doing things and then do it in a prohibited way. Since it's so easy to write a Piros Bol, so we assume if he says, I wrote it and I lost it, we assume that he really did write it and lost it, and not that he planned to collect it without a Piros Bol, because the people wouldn't put themselves in a situation of prohibition when they could do something in a get the same result in a permitted way. And now a story of a person who came to Rav, and he wanted to collect the money, but he didn't have a Piros Bol. And he didn't even make a claim that he had one and lost it. He just didn't have one. He didn't say anything about it. So Rav prompted him and said, well, maybe did you write a Piros Bol? Maybe you lost it? He's trying to prompt to see if this lender ever had a Piros Bol. Now then the lender might jog his memory, and maybe he'll say, oh, you know what, I did. Right now I remember, because maybe they all did it, like we do it on Motzei Shabbat. Everybody comes and we make an announcement that everybody writes a Piros Bol. So he might also then jog his memory and says, oh yeah, I did write a Piros Bol, but I lost it. That's fine, right? We're not prompting him to lie, of course, but rather to jog his memory. And now, in general, a judge, a dayan, should not do this. A dayan should not act like a lawyer and offer possible arguments on behalf of one party or the other. And in this case, it's going to benefit the lender, because if he can collect, then the borrower is going to have to pay. So in general, a judge cannot offer advice on what to plead. However, in this case, we say, petach picha le'ilem, right? If someone is mute, meaning they don't know the argument themselves, then open your mouth for them and plead on their behalf. And so in a few cases, when it's clear that the person just doesn't realize that they have a good claim, so then the judge can step in and say, listen, no, you have a good claim. And so this is a case like that, and this follows up with what Rav Nachman said here, right? Because we assume people would do things in a permitted way, and so probably most people will write a pidos bol. So if they say they forgot it, and the Rav is adding, even if they don't say they forgot it, we can ask them, did you write one and you maybe and you lost it? And so if the person says, oh yeah, I did write one and lose it, then we will believe him and he can collect the loan. Tanan, v'chen ba'al chov shemosi shtar chov ve'en imo pidos bol, hare elu lo yipareu. Now we challenge this statement of Rav because here we have a Mishnat Ketubot that says a creditor who presents a promissory note and there's no pidos bol, then you don't pay. Now, we assume that this is not talking about a simple case of no pidos bol, and Shemitah canceled it, because then that would be obvious. So, therefore, the Gemara is assuming this must be a case where he had a pidos bol, but he lost it, and it says you cannot collect. So this contradicts Rav. And we answer, Tana'ehi de Tanya Mosi Shtar Chov Sarich Shehe Imo Pidos Bol Hachamim Omerim Eno Sarich. In fact, this is a machloket between two Tanaim, as it says in a Braita, someone who presents a promissory note after Shemitah canceled, he has to have a Pidos Bol in hand. That's the Tanakama. So that Tanakama say has to have one. That would be inconsistent with this Mishnah Ketubot. Hachamim who say you don't need one, they don't mean that you don't need one at all. It means you don't need one present, because if you had one and lost it, then we will believe you. And so Rav can follow the opinion of the Chachamim in this Baraita. The next Mishnah continues the theme of the previous Mishnayot of doing various things for the betterment of the world, for the community. And this one has to do with redeeming captives, which is always a good thing. In this case, the captives happen to be already slaves. Eved Kanani is owned by a Jew. And then that Eved Kanani is captured by non-Jewish pirates. Or whoever. Aved shenishba ufta'uhu im l'shum aved yishtabed im l'shum ben chorin lo yishtabed. Tanakama says that let's say I own an aved Kana'ani. Aved Kana'ani doesn't necessarily mean has to be from Canaan. It means anyone who is not Jewish who then is sold into slavery or captured into slavery by a Jew. And then that person is captured by pirates and then redeemed by someone else. Right? Third party, a different Jew redeems that person. So then what's the status of that Eved Kanani? Does he remain an Eved Kanani? Or through this process of being captured and redeemed, perhaps he goes free. Act of freeing an Eved Kanani makes that Eved into a full free Jew. So, Tanakama says it depends. If the person who paid to ransom that person, the Aved, ransom the person, having in mind that he will remain a slave, then he remains a slave. The Gemara will discuss a slave to who? To the first owner or to the redeemer. And if he redeems him having in mind that he will be a free person, then he will be a free person. So it depends on the person who pays the ransom. Whatever he has in mind, that's what it will be. Makes sense. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer ben kach or ben kach ishtabed. However, Rashbag says either way, even if the redeemer has in mind that he's going to redeem this slave as a free person, he still remains a slave. And the Gemara will explain why. Okay, so first we ask, B'may askinan? What kind of case are we talking about? We're asking about Yeush, the mindset of the original owner. Yeush means despair. If I lose my ear pods, and I still say, I'm going to find them, I still think I'm going to find them, then I still retain ownership over it, and therefore anyone who finds it has to return it to me. They can't keep it because it's still mine. However, if after a while I say, I must have lost it and on the train, there's no way I'm ever going to find it again, Oh, forget about it. Forget about it. Yeush. I despair of ever finding it again. Then it's basically I'm making it hefker. It's not mine. In that case, anyone who finds it can, in fact, keep it. And so right, that's a whole issue of Yeush. So now we're asking about the same thing, not regarding a lost object, but here a captured slave. So if the original owner still says, before Yeush, I'm going to get him back. I'm going to get this servant back. Well then, right, that first master still owns him. So even if the second guy, the redeemer, comes and frees him as a free person, why should he not remain a slave? So it doesn't make sense in that sense. In that case, ela lahad yeush l'shum aved amai yishtabed. But if it's after the first owner gave up, right? So if he gave up, he despaired of ever getting the slave back. Then the slave is hefker. Hefker, he gains his own freedom by at that point, right? He's no one owns him, so he's free. If so, when the second guy comes, and even if he says I'm redeeming you, having in mind that you will be a slave, it shouldn't work, because once someone is free, that's it. They're free. And so why should he go? How could he go back to being a slave? So this is the question. We're going to see two answers. Abaye amar Abaye leolam lifnei yeush ulsham aibed yishtabed lerabo lirishon l'shum ben chorin lo yishtabed lo lerabo rishon velo lerabo sheni lerabo sheni lo tehal l'shum ben chorin parkeh l'shum rishon namela dilma mimne'eh vela parkeh. So Abaye says we're talking about a case where the first owner did not despair, and therefore if the second guy comes and redeems him as a slave, well, he's going to remain a slave to the first owner, because the first owner never despaired of getting him back, so he still owns him. However, if the second owner comes and redeems him as a free person, well then, he's not going to go back to the first owner, or to the second owner. Why? He's not going to go to the second owner because the second owner redeemed him as a free person. So though the second owner is can't take him as a slave, since he redeemed him not to be a slave, and he also cannot go back to the first person because, and here's a kind of tikkun olam, even though the Mishnah doesn't mention those words, because we worry that in general, people with money, generous people that would otherwise redeem people who were captured, they would not want to redeem these slaves, because he's going to say to himself, why should I pay to redeem the slaves from pirates if anyway he's going to go and become a slave to his original owner? Oh, he's a slave here, he's a captured guy here, I'm not going to bother to spend money on that. And we don't want that to happen. We want to encourage redemption of captive people. And therefore, we say, listen, even though the first owner did not have Yeush and still wants his slave back, we say that the slave goes free. If the Redeemer has in mind, I would like him to go free, then he goes free, because that is better for encouraging more ransoming of captive people. Okay, that's Abaye's explanation of Tanakama. Now Abaye also has to explain Rashbag. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, according to Abaye, ben kach u ben kach yishtabed. Kasabar keshem shemisva lifdot et ben chorin, kach misva lifdot et ha'abadim. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says that no matter what, the person remains a slave. Because the original owner did not have Yeush, so the original owner still owns that slave and he remains a slave. And therefore it doesn't matter what the Redeemer had in mind. He can have in mind anything he wants. I still own him because I never gave up ownership. And so, how about now? Rashbag is not worried about this worry that we had at the end, that people will no longer want to redeem people, because if they're gonna go back to being slaves. Rashbag says here, it says kasavar, which sounds like we are putting these words into his mouth, that he would say this. We're going to see in a minute that the Rashbag is actually quoted as saying these exact words. So whether he said them or we're assuming that he would agree with them. The point is, he would say that just like there's a mitzvah to redeem people who will be free, so too there is a mitzvah to redeem people who are slaves. And so they'll go back to being slaves. Still better than being captured and imprisoned by pirates who just want a price for your head. Even slavery has, even Eved Kanani has many protections, and still generally we're treated better than a captive would, and therefore still is a mitzvah to redeem them. And so we don't have to worry. People still will continue to redeem and spend money to redeem slaves. That is Rashbag's opinion. Okay, all that is Abaye that says Lifnei Yeush. However, Rava Amar Leolam La'achar Yeush Ushum Ayved Yishtabed L'Rabo Sheni Ulishum Ben Horin Lo Yishtabed Lo L'Rabo Rishon Velo L'Rabo Sheni L'Rabo Risheni Lo Teha Lishum Ben Horin Parke L'Rabo Rishon Namela Rava says it's after the original owner gave up, says, oh, those pirates took him, that's it, I'm never going to get that slave back again. Okay, I relinquish ownership of him, so now that person is free. So, if the redeemer, who pays the ransom, redeems him as a slave, well then, now he's basically buying him, and so he becomes a slave to that second person. He has a new master. If he does it redeems him as a free person, then he will not be a slave, not to the first or to the second guy, because he had in mind, I'm going to redeem him to be free. So, makes sense. And he's not going to go back to the first one because the first owner already despaired of getting him back, and that way he would go free. That's how Rava explains it. Now Rava also has to explain the opinion of Rashbag. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, ben kach ben kach yishta'abed. Rabban Rashbag says he's a slave no matter what. Kidechizkiyah, right? Why should this be? If the first owner despaired and the second owner redeems him as a free person, so now who's gonna receive him as a slave? This is Machloket Rishonim, who actually would be the owner of him afterwards. Would it be the first one that, even though he gave up, he had Yeush, but now that he's redeemed, he's like, okay, I'll take him back, or would it be the second one? It makes more sense to be the first one, since he was his slave, and he gave up only because he thought he's never going to get him back, but he would actually want him to come back if he could. So that seems to make more sense. Okay, in any case, why would we now make him a slave if legally he basically gained his freedom and he's being redeemed as a free person? Kidechizkiyah damar chizkiyah. Mipnei ma amru ben kach uben kach yishtabed shelo yeh kol echad ve'echad holech umapil atzmo legaisot mafki asmo miyad rabo. Chizkiyah is worried that we won't be able to continue the institution of slavery because every slave will go and give himself over to foreign troops, meaning, say, please capture me. I'd rather, anything. I'd rather be captured than be a slave over here. And then that person can assume, most likely someone will redeem him. This is the troops don't actually want these people. They just are capturing them to get a ransom, and so he'll probably be ransomed. And then once he's ransomed, the person putting up the money for the ransom will probably do it to be a free person because they're nice people in the first place. And then everyone can become free because the original owner most likely is going to say, "Oh, he was captured by the troops. I'm never going to get him back." Right? And so this would give a way out and encourage slaves to go and give themselves up as captives to be redeemed and be free. And so this is, this would kind of end slavery, but according to Chizkiyah, this would not be a good thing. It would cause a lot of trouble. And therefore, he said that don't try this at home. Don't try to be a runaway slave and make yourself a captive, because if you do that, you know what? Then you'll still get, even if they redeem you as a free person, and even if your original master gave up on you, you're still going to go back and be a slave. That would be Rashbag, according to Rava. Good. Now we ask a question on Rava. Me'tibe. Amar lehen Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Keshem shemisva leftot et ben horin, kam misva leftot et ha'abadim. So now you see we're quoting Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel with this statement, even though over here we said as a kasavar. But anyway, this is a statement that Abaye brought to explain why lifnei yeush Rashbag would say, yeah, go ahead. Even though if those ifnei yeush, according to Rashbag, he remains a slave because ifnei yeush, and so the original owner owns him, and we're not worried about that people won't redeem. Just like you should redeem a free person, so you should redeem a slave. So this reasoning makes sense according to Abaye. But how would Rava explain this braita that quotes Rashbag, giving this reason? Right, as we said just now, Abaye quotes this line, and that makes sense. He needs this Lashem to explain why lifnei yeush Rashbag prohibits. Rava's explanation, which was after Yeush, the reason his explanation of Rashbag was based on Chizkiyah, who said we don't want people to go and make them and get out of being a slave by giving themselves up. So that was his reasoning of Rashbag, not this reasoning of Keshem. So how would Rava explain this braita of Rashbag saying the Keshem reasoning? And the answer is Amalach Rava, Rabban Shimon Gamliel la vayada mai kamri Rabbanan. Rashbag, although he himself was assuming Rava's explanation, that it's lachar yeush, right? According to Rava, Rashbag was talking about a case of lachar yeush. However, Rashbag, when he was responding to Tanakama, he said, I don't know what Rashbag didn't know what case Rabbanan were assuming, and so he said he's giving him an answer either way. Rashbag says to Tanakama, if your halacha, that you split the difference, if it's depending on what the person has in mind, the Redeemer has in mind. If you're talking about a case that the original owner had before did not have Yeush, then I will respond to you, Keshem. Don't worry about that. The Redeemers aren't going to want to redeem people. It's a mitzvah to redeem people no matter what. So I would disagree with you in that case. And ilachar Yeush kamritu, and if you think it's lachar Yeush, which is what Rava thinks that Tanakama said and Rashbag himself said, then I would say I would give the reasoning of Chizkiyah. And so that's why Rashbag said the Keshem, just in case Tanakama thought gave their halacha lifnei yeush. So that explains everybody. Okay, and now Rava, another question against Rava. Amar lachar yeush. Rabo sheni miman kanile mishabai. Shabai gufeh mi kanile. If it's after Yeush, so the original owner gave up on him. Okay, so he doesn't belong to him anymore. If the second guy, the Redeemer, pays the ransom and to receive the slave as a slave, then he keeps it as a slave. And so we ask, wait a second, what right does the second guy have to take him as a slave? Who's he acquiring it from? From captors. But do the captors legitimately acquire the person as a slave? Right? You can't, if you buy stolen goods from a thief, it's not yours. You stole it from a thief. So the captors didn't own him as a slave to be able to sell him as a slave. And so why should you say that the second guy gets him as a slave? And we say, yes, in fact, kani le l'maaseh yadav, de'amar Resh Lakish, menayin legoy shekana tagoy l'maaseh yadav, shenemar v'gam mibnei toshavim hagerim machem, mehem tiknu, atem konim mehem, ולא הם קונים מכם, ולא הם קונים זה מזה, יכול לא יקנו זה את זה, יכול לא יקנו זה את זה, והאמת לא הם קונים זה מזה, הכי כמר ולא הם קונים זה מזה לגופו. So we say, yes, indeed, one non-Jew can acquire another non-Jew, not his body himself, but rather his labor. Anything that he does, the non-Jewish master can own. And we know this from the statement of Resh Lakish that says, how do you know that a non-Jew that acquires a non-Jew and can acquire a non-Jew for his work, for his labor? As it says, this is regarding Israel, the Bnei Israel, you can acquire people that live amongst you, you can acquire them. So that we learn from there that a Yisrael can acquire a non-Jew, but they cannot acquire you. In other words, a non-Jew has no right to acquire the body of a Jew, and they cannot acquire each other. Okay, so the full slavery can only be a Yisrael owning a goy. However, but then the Midrash asks, wait a second, is that true that a non-Jew cannot acquire a non-Jew at all? We interrupt the Braita to say, why are you asking this question? That can it be that they don't acquire at all? You just said that they don't acquire, right? So here's what we mean. Hachikamad. Is it true that they do not acquire at all legufo, right? That what we said here, they cannot acquire, a non-Jew cannot acquire another non-Jew. That means in his own body. That was a statement, and that's true. Now what we're asking is, can it be that that's absolute, and the non-Jew cannot acquire another non-Jew even for his work? Goy lokol sheken. So we say kavachomer. A goy can acquire a Jew for his labor. So certainly a goy can acquire another goy for his labor. Bottom line is that yes, when these non-Jewish pirates come and acquire an Eved Kanaani, they can acquire not his body, because a non-Jew cannot take either a Jew or a non-Jew for his body, but can acquire him as a slave for his labor. And so yes, he's acquiring him for his labor, and therefore that is still slavery. And that's why when the Jewish second guy redeems him, he can redeem him as a slave. Because that is still considered, that is still slavery. Okay. Wait a second, maybe that's only this law that a non-Jew can acquire someone else for his labor is only if he actually acquires him with money, because that's a legal transaction. But if he just takes him, just captures him, so that's illegal. And I might say that no, it doesn't work. But in fact it does, because Papa said that when Sihon, when Sihon came and they conquered Ammon and Moab, they purified in the sense that Bnei Yisrael were not allowed to conquer the lands of Ammon and Moab, because the Torah says your brethren, you're not allowed to take them. But Sichon, that's okay. However, once Sichon conquers Ammon and Moab, now it's considered the property of Sichon, and so now Bnei Yisrael can take it over. It's not about the land; it's about who owns the land. The point is, you see from here that Sichon is able to forcefully, right, through grabbing the people and their land, they're able to actually acquire them. And now they're no longer Ammon and Moab. Now they're acquired by Sichon, they're owned by Sichon, and so they take on a new identity. And so that's how we know that, yes, in fact, even a non-Jew can acquire another non-Jew, not only with money, but also by taking him by force. Good. Ashkechan goy yisami nalan. Okay, from this context, I would only know that one non-Jew, like Sichon, can acquire another non-Jew, like in Moab, by capturing them. How do you know that a non-Jew meaning it legally is effective, if a non-Jew takes a Jew and he would own them, even though he's not paying for it, taking it forcefully, he would still own his labor. Tichti vayish mimenu shebi. Pasuk says that the Canaanim who dwelt in the south heard Israel came by the way of Atarim, and he fought against Israel and took of them captive. So here you see Canaanim taking Israel captive by force, and it says they really are taken, and so it's a legally meaningful act, even though it's just grabbing them. And so yes, it does become a legally meaningful act, and that's how we know that in fact a non-Jew who comes and takes an Eved Kanaani does acquire the Eved Kanaani, and therefore when the Jew goes and redeems that Eved Kanaani as an Eved, then they do have the right to keep that person as an Eved. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.